Ladies and gents, this is the last assignment video for the revolvers course from SDI. That is going to be FTH 202. This is week 5, and really today is going to be a little bit less wrench turning, a little bit more reflection on the course itself. I'm going to keep it straight to the point and get into it for you guys. So the first point of discussion that I want to go over, the overall health of the firearm. That is going to be the first part of the assignment. Depending on how you go about this, you could, inspect the firearm and determine what the overall health is in your own way. For this case, I'm going to kind of approach it as if it was, just a basic rundown on what I would look for, what state this revolver is in on the fly without taking it apart or anything, essentially. But first things first, you always want to make sure the gun's safe and unloaded and clear. So we got all 6 cylinders clear, nothing in the bore, no live ammunition in the vicinity. I'm going to start with just the visual inspection first. So visual inspection, kind of give it a good little look around, look for any messed up fasteners. This part's kind of tricky. You don't want to flag yourself in the face, but you do want to inspect the crown the best you can. My best recommendation would be to, if it's a revolver, is you'd have like a white card or an index card or something, and you can kind of hold it under the breech side of the bore, but with some space so some light can bounce off of it, and then it'll reflect a little bit of light within the rifling inside. And then you could also use a flashlight to shine at an angle, or a bore light if you hit it from the breech side, and you'll be able to inspect the rifling towards the muzzle as well. You want to make sure that crown is uniform all the way around, no scratches, no burring, and corrosion's a big thing too. Next thing is going to be a dry fire function check. This is with no snap caps. Do both double action. Look for any resistance in the trigger pull on different cylinders, maybe different sounds, really just the way it feels and sounds. You could do single action too. Make sure that each hammer pull feels about the same. You don't want to have any that feel abnormally tight or like a lot of resistance on any particular pull. You'd also do a little resistance check on the cylinder notches and the cylinder stop. They taught us this in our lecture a couple of times actually throughout the course. You can put your finger, so since the cylinder rotates counterclockwise, I'm going to put my thumb here, so it's kind of getting pinched in there. And basically all that does is give it a little bit of resistance. You want to see how the timing is with that resistance applied to the cylinder. And basically that indicates that we have good timing there. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to throw some snap caps in here and basically do the same thing. Each one felt the same in both modes, single action and double action, so that's a good sign. You can hold the hammer back and make sure the cylinder is rotating. There's no resistance on any of those dummy cartridges. What's unique with the dummy rounds is you can, as with any other firearm, this will allow you to test the extraction and ejection portions of the cycle of operations without using live ammo. We can see that the ejection rod or ejection star will actually push all of them out and doesn't miss any of them. Now that we've done a visual inspection, a dry fire test, dummy ammunition function check as well, we can move on to the more intricate things, I guess. Checking the ejection rod or the yoke is something I would actually include in the visual inspection portion. So my bad there. I should have put this back there. All you're really going to be doing is checking the moving parts. This cylinder should be spinning almost perfectly concentric. So when you turn the rod here, there shouldn't be any wobble. Now, because this firearm is so new, it's pretty spot on. I'm gonna move on to using the tools, outside of the dummy rounds, of course. I want to get into using the trigger pull gauge to determine, the health of the mechanisms within the firearm here. I'm not a revolver expert, but generally for double action trigger pull, around the 10 plus or minus 2 pounds is kind of ideal. That's your average. And then for a double or a single action trigger pull, you should be around, I think it was 7. I could be wrong. I'd have to brush up on the course content to verify that. But going into doing this with a ballpark idea of what the trigger should be, if you're shooting a super high number, like if you're pulling a 15-pound trigger pull on double action, then something's going on. You can also check for the grittiness of the trigger too. In a recent video, you saw that I just did a full trigger job with the springs and polished the sear surfaces. So this is going to be super smooth with a light trigger pull as well. Those are some things you'd want to check. I left something out in the last assignment that was part of the assignment. So yeah, I did get dinged points for that, but I do feel like it's an important thing to check as far as in regard to the health of the firearm is the go and no-go gauges. So I typically do the no-go gauge first, but the thing is, the key thing that you want to remember is when you're doing this, you don't want to just force it in willy-nilly in any configuration. You want to make sure that this no-go gauge is, you know, on the side at the 9 o'clock position. It's a no-go gauge, so it's not going to fit in there. The idea of the no-go gauge is it's just as you'd expect. It should not go in. This is going to verify that your head spacing is correct, or the placement of the cylinder as far as like end shake isn't, you know, out of tolerance. Now we're going to take the go gauge, same thing. Make sure it's at the 9 o'clock or outside of the frame when going in. And this one should freely go in. The go gauge does go in. But yeah, that's my little rundown on how I check for the health of a firearm. Oh, little bonus point. If you have any spent casings from the firearm, like if it's your buddies and he wants you to inspect it for him, ask him to bring some, you know, spent casings too, because a spent casing from that gun could tell you something about, you know, what's going on. So if this casing has like a bunch of scoring on it, you can tell that that would indicate that one of the chambers might have, you know, some scoring on the inside or some corrosion or even some burring on the breech side. So the primer, if the primer is completely punched through, you know, that would indicate maybe you got to adjust the end shake on the cylinder a little bit, adjust that clearance that we checked with the go gauges. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. All right, so the next part of this assignment was talking about some learning experience that I may have had. So it's kind of vague. I want to branch out and touch on a wider range of things because I gotta come up with 10 of them. So the first thing I really want to do, talk about is, I think, as I've said in past videos, I was never a revolver guy before this. I never owned one. So I didn't know anything about them. So learning about revolvers as a whole was just kind of like a big thing for me. This class got me to go from like 0 to 100 pretty quick as far as my knowledge for revolvers. So I think it was taught really well in that aspect. Now getting into some of the more technical stuff, I would say timing was something that I was curious about even before I started the class, because these guns, they by the pull of a trigger, especially in, you know, in a double action revolver, if by the pull of a trigger or single action pulling the hammer, there's a lot of stuff that's going on at the same time to help that revolver run efficiently and correctly. So learning how all the mechanisms work to get the perfect timing was another big learning curve for me. While I was learning that, I was also learning about you know, the mechanical differences between double action and single action, which kind of blew my mind. I mean, this happens to me every day at work because I work on planes, and it's just seeing the kind of stuff, mechanical innovations that humans have created. Along with timing is you know, cylinder jobs and cylinder adjustments, you know, like end shake, for example, or even cylinder gap. Learning about how we didn't do this, but learning that, you know, to adjust those, you could put they're like washer spacers, basically, that will adjust the forward and aft position of the cylinder itself. The trigger job was a new thing for me. I mean, I've never done a trigger job or spring job on any of my guns. I've done like trigger swaps, so I wouldn't really count that as like a trigger job, because you're not really altering any springs or changing out any springs or sear surfaces. This was the first time I actually did what I would call a trigger job, and it was just kind of crazy seeing like the change in trigger pull weight without changing out the trigger mechanism. That's the first I've ever done that. Learning about the forcing cone as well, about the kind of jobs that you could do with the forcing cone. So you can ream that out and give it more of a, make it more of a forcing cone, really. A lot of, you know, competition shooters, like probably Jerry Mitchell, would probably do a forcing cone job on pretty much any revolver he touches. So it really just helps the bullet become more aligned with the rifling of the bore, essentially. It's a very, very layman's way of saying it. The first week of the course, when we were learning about the history, intrigued me also, because I've never really been a big history guy, but I was for this course. Learning that Colt was the first, you know, to really take a shot at innovating handguns or rotating cylinder handguns. And, you know, minus like his fall with like the financial resources, you know, throughout the history, knowing that he was like the first one to take a shot at it and innovating it kind of makes sense. I mean, when I think of revolvers, the only thing I really think of is like a Colt Python, you know, that's the first revolver that comes to mind for me. So it kind of clicks and makes sense in my head why that's like the most renowned, you know, one of the most sought after revolver models. Another technical aspect to it was, you know, tricks of the trade. Every gunsmithing comes with tricks of the trade. And what I mean by that is like things that you wouldn't like learn just by examining and taking it apart and just discovering things. One thing in particular is like taking the side plate off. Part of learning how to be a gunsmith or learning how to gunsmith a revolver is knowing the proper way to take that side. In each video that I disassembled the revolver, you saw me, whack the frame right where the grip is to pop it off and not pry it off. It's really important. And then my last two aren't really about revolvers themselves, but I still learned from this class is kind of like grew a little bit in my filming experience, I guess. I go down my past videos not very often because of how cringy they are to me, but I keep them up because people watch them still. And but I feel like I've gotten a little better. I took a break. Like I think it's been like a year since I've filmed an assignment for SDI, but I'm trying to make a little change, get better. I invested in a little $30 microphone, so my videos are not so crappy, but I struggled with keeping my videos like structurally like cohesive, I guess, like structurally organized. And I feel like I did a lot better with this class because I'm just focusing on one thing, and it's revolvers. And then last but not least, I kind of got over my fear of like lack of confidence in learning a new system, like a new firearm, something that's foreign to me, I started the class, I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to be like an expert with revolvers or like familiarized with revolvers in 5 weeks. Like that's kind of crazy. And then I don't know, I just kind of did it, So in the class, I think it was the first or second week, I can't remember, but basically one of the assignments or one of the parts of the assignments was determining what malfunctions particular parts could induce. So that's kind of backwards for me because, with planes, whether it's planes or firearms, it's the malfunction that happens first and then you're trying to chase after the part. And I think switching it up like that, picking the part first and determining what malfunctions it would produce kind of helped me learn this faster than I would have if I didn't approach it that way. So yeah, lastly, I'm going to be touching on the key differences between, a single action revolver and a double action revolver like this one here. I'm going to start with the obvious one first, and it's going to be that, double action revolvers can be shot two different ways. So you have your single action, which has been around a little longer. Then you have your double action. It's gonna have a little bit more trigger pull. So that's a big key thing. Another thing that you'll notice about double action revolvers is that they have a yoke that carries the cylinder. To my knowledge, I don't think there's any single action revolvers that have a cylinder that comes out of the frame. Those are usually gonna have a loading gate, which is kind of like cut out in, I think they refer to it as a recoil shield in the lecture. Can't remember, that was week one. That's another thing, is the removable cylinder. So this style of frame is going to be more, I think they call these a J-frame. I can't remember. We're learning about all the different frame models, but certain frame models or frame types are very specific to double action because obviously the internals are differently and that has to be mechanically assembled differently than a single action. Obviously, there's a little more moving parts in a double action. You have, I think, 2 more sear surfaces in the double action because you have the one that's actually pushing the hammer back in double action mode. Then you have your double action sear. I think those are the same sear. I get a little ahead of myself when I'm talking about revolvers because I've been working with this one for 5 weeks, but it's still a new system to me. So, but yeah, I mean, there's really not much more to it unless you want to get into the history of it. That'll be a little homework for you if you're really intrigued about difference in their upbringings, I guess. So without further ado, I'd say it's about time to wrap this video up. It was a pleasure providing videos on revolvers for you guys. But this course has come to an end. This is my last assignment for it. And then my next video will be, related to the next course, which is striker fired pistols. So stay tuned for that one. I already got the non-FFL package to my house, and the lower receiver for that pistol should be at my indoor range probably in the next 48 hours. So stay tuned for that. Watch that. Check out SDI at the link below. That is not only if you want to get into gunsmithing, but unmanned drone stuff. I think that's what I can't remember what they refer it to as, but drones basically. If you want to get into drones too, they do that as well. But yeah, I got nothing else for you guys for now. Peace.